Good evening. I'll call this meeting to order. Hudson Board of Education regular meeting, Tuesday, January 12th, 2010. Thanks for coming. We'll begin the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd please stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Board members have a copy of the agenda in front of them. If there's no comments, I'll entertain a motion for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
We have a motion by Lynn.
Second.
Second by Mark. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion's approved. We'll move on to the superintendent's report. Mary?
Well, we had a lot of interest for our 2 seats on the Board of Education this coming April. We had 6 candidates file papers, and I will talk about the primary because there are 6. We have a primary February 16th, and in that primary, the top 4 vote getters will move forward to the April 6th election. The order on the ballot is Cindy Crimmins, who is an incumbent, John E. Engel, Jim L. Bartline, Mark R. Kaiserschott, an incumbent, Lester German, and Pat German. Parent groups, as I understand, are working on a candidate forum that I hope will be before the primary election. But we're not guaranteed that at this point. We don't have a date or any additional information. Any questions, or do you want me to just move on? Yes? All right, moving on.
I think we can just go through your report.
All right,
Thank you.
open enrollment. Our dates are posted on our website, and there's a link to the DPI information. Open enrollment dates are February 1st through the 19th, and open enrollment is for parents from another district applying to a district where they would like their children to attend, and it's their non-resident district. So we can anticipate that there would be students from our district. Their parents may apply to another district, and also that some parents will apply here as well. The board takes action on those applications. As you know, you've done that in the past. Certainly the board can deny the application, and one of the things that happened last year for the very first time is we denied applications, second applications for those students who were already in our elementary schools moving into the middle school in 6th grade. Some of those had siblings who were in the system as well. And that's the first time we did that. We did that because of the middle school being over-enrolled, and we anticipate that we will do that again this year for any applications to the middle school because there is no additional space available. And unless there's any questions, I'll just keep moving on. All right, next, I have in your packets something I received at the Chancellor's Advisory meeting in UW River Falls. And I thought this was just another data point for us to have. And this is Applied Population Lab out of UW-Madison, which previously to using Dr. Reinhardt, I believe the district had Applied Population do some projections for us. And they are looking at this map of the state of Wisconsin looks at high school graduates by county, and looks at that either growth or decline from 2009 to 2015. And you can see the projected change. And the county that I think is most important to us certainly is St. Croix County. It has the highest projected change, positive, of 82 based on applied populations projections. So again, another data point. If we look at the entire state, St. Croix County is projected to have the most growth in graduates over this period of time. And just as a data point for us, certainly we are not the only district in St. Croix County, but we are the largest district in St. Croix County. And our class of 2009, we had 422 graduates. Moving on then to middle school space for learning. I just talked a few minutes ago when I talked about open enrollment that the middle school is over our capacity. In fact, it's this year at our September official date, it was 86 students over its capacity. And if we look at the next 4 years and the projections that Dr. Hazel Reinhardt developed for us, her low projections would tell us that we'd be just under 300 additional students in the next 4 years. So that's through 2013 to 2014. So as you know, we have put the Space for Learning, the long-term plan, on temporary hold. And so we need to continue to move forward with middle school Space for Learning, our process for short-term options. We brought this plan to the Facilities and Grounds Committee, so they have looked at it. And you'll notice that the actions are listed, and then it says tentative timeline. The timeline may be affected by what those options are. It might also be affected by federal stimulus, school construction funds, and an application process that has not come out from the federal government yet. So we can't really anticipate deadlines, and we may have to move forward sooner as a result of that if we choose to take advantage of those construction bonds. So this is a tentative timeline based with those caveats. We are in the process right now of collecting initial data and reviewing that. We've moved forward with developing a list of short-term options, and we are starting the process now of researching the most promising options, knowing these are short-term. And then we'll move forward in February of narrowing that preliminary list, which options should we further consider, moving forward to a March 9th board meeting where we will be reporting on those short-term options to the board. In any time during that January through March time period, we may bring additional information to the Facilities and Grounds Committee or the Finance Committee, depending upon where we are and what the options require. We would then gather additional information from the board meeting, and then at the next April 6th board meeting, we would recommend a short-term option to you. And again, this is a tentative timeline, but it gives you kind of the steps that we're looking at moving forward with. So if you have any questions on that, I'd be happy to answer those.
Any questions for Mary on her report? If not, thank you, Mary. Mm-hmm. We'll move on to the reports. Consideration of WASB resolutions. Board members received those in their digital materials, and if you have any questions about that, we certainly can discuss it now. Otherwise, you can contact Tom, who's going to be our delegate there between now and next week, and share with him any questions or concerns that you may have. So, Tom, do you have anything? Okay. Move on to HSD 2025 implementation project Lead the Way grant for the middle school. Sandy?
Thank you. We are very pleased this evening to announce that the Kern Family Foundation has awarded a grant of $25,000 to the Hudson School District to implement and expand our Project Lead the Way program to the middle school level. And the grant was approved for so that in 2010 we'll receive $20,000, in 2011 $5,000. The program at the middle level is titled Gateway to Technology, so it's like the pre-engineering pieces to our high school program that we started this fall. It's designed a little differently. There are 6 modules, and our 2 tech ed teachers at the middle level will be attending training, and in their training they receive training on all 6 modules. And what's pretty exciting is that in those 6 we have design and modeling, magic of electrons, science of technology, automation and robotics, flight and space, and new for 2010 is energy and the environment. Kind of fits right with where we want to go. That's pretty fun. The other part that will be, we think that will really be powerful as we roll this into place and roll up to the high school, is because 6th graders and 7th graders have required tech classes. That means we will make attempts then to, as you can see, we are right now tentatively placing design and modeling into the 6th grade exploratory. So all 6th graders then will experience that course. And then we'll also be looking to place one in the 7th grade exploratory, again, so all students can experience that. And then there are 2 8th grade electives currently, and we're looking at the automation robotics fitting into one and flight and space in the other. And then, of course, once we know more about the new module, energy and the environment, we'll look at either a new elective and or look if there's a place to put it in either one of the required courses at 6th and 7th grade. You may recall that just a year ago, we were announcing a $34,000 grant from Kern Foundation to begin the implementation of Project Lead the Way, the pre-engineering courses at the high school. So these are just lining right up with where we want to go with HSD 2025, and very excited. The middle school is ecstatic that they get to begin this program next fall.
All right, thanks, Sandy. Any questions for Sandy regarding that?
I actually had one follow-up question, Sandy, which was, I was thinking there were only components of the 6 units that we were going to introduce in the upcoming academic year. Is that right?
Yeah, we actually have 3 years to implement. And so once the gentlemen are trained and we have a better idea of all the pieces, then we'll look at, right now we're planning on starting with the 6th grade exploratory this fall and perhaps one of the 8th grade exploratories. That'll allow both of the teachers to implement one component and then roll it up the remaining ones the following year. Thank you.
One more question.
Brian?
This is great. The funding, how's it being allocated? Is that most like funding just goes to kind of initial training costs, or?
Correct. The district actually will fund most of the training costs. This goes for a lot of the resources that the students need to use in their hands-on projects that are part of the curriculum.
So after we're through this initial grant, do we see a significant additional cost, kind of recurring costs to run this program, or?
We'll have to kind of meld it right into curriculum review, and so that it becomes part of what we do on a every 5-6 year basis. Correct.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Anyone else? Sandy, can you just talk a little? I'm trying to recall the Kern Family Foundation. Is that a foundation that's where?
I want to say their home base is out of in New York somewhere on the East Coast.
Somewhere way.
Correct.
Okay.
But then they've really been instrumental throughout the country in getting Project Lead the Way kick-started.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Great. Thank you. If there's no other questions, we'll move on. Topics for action. Race to the top. Mary?
The Race to the Top is part of the federal stimulus program, a very complex part of that program. And so I'm going to give you a brief overview in a few minutes and try to answer any questions that you might have. It provides state fundings on a competitive grant basis to support state educational reform that is based on developing and adopting common national standards and assessments to prepare students to be college and work ready. It supports staffing with effective teachers and principals, utilizes longitudinal data systems to measure student, teacher, and school systems, and it's also designed to focus on turning around the lowest achieving schools in the country. Much of the design and how it is based is on urban improvement, which has some things that don't work as well as we'd like them to in our district. It has a very aggressive timeline. We'll talk about the timeline in just a minute. The state of Wisconsin is submitting an application and so hoping to be one of the states that is selected to participate in this program. And that application is for $254 million. This is a competitive process, so Wisconsin may receive no funding. It might receive some funding less than what they're asking for, and it may receive all of what they're asking for. If the state receives funding, there are essentially two phases of that funding. The first phase, which is described in Exhibit 1 that you have in your materials, requires districts to agree to a Memorandum of Understanding, which you're taking action on tonight, and then eventually have an approved plan of work based on all of the requirements. The second phase is competitive grants, and you have to have signed the Memorandum of Understanding to even qualify for the second phase and have that approved work plan. The second part of the funding could be to help fund your plan or to extend some of your efforts. The funds are available starting next year, and the project period to use those funds is 4 years. The Hudson School District, how this interacts with us, under Phase 1, if the state receives the $254 million, Hudson could receive an estimated $321,420. Now, I just want to emphasize it could be less because the state would receive less, and it could be more. And the reason it could be more, if the state is funded at the $254 million and not all the districts in the state accept their monies and fill out that work plan, then those dollars will be reallocated. So under Phase 1, it actually could be more, but we have no indication at this point if we will have any money, some money, or how much money. The scope of work is outlined again in Exhibit 1. There are multiple requirements, and again, those are on standards and assessment, data systems, effective teachers and principals, turning around struggling schools, and for us, that emphasis is on learning interventions, response to intervention, things we've talked about, and then STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math initiatives. Wisconsin added the STEM connection just to make their application more attractive. So it wasn't required by the feds, it was encouraged by the feds, but federal government, but it was added in Wisconsin as making Wisconsin look good. Districts must agree to implement all 5 requirements. And we have, as a district, have already made progress in some of these areas. You just heard tonight, extending our Project Lead the Way initiative. We have a principal mentoring program that it talks about. We have literacy coaches. We do not have the literacy coaches or math coaches that it talks about to the extent it talks about in this. So it would require more. We have teacher mentoring and so forth. But funding cannot supplant what we already do. So we can't replace Race to the Top funds with what we're already funding. It has to be new initiatives moving forward what we're already doing. So that's part of the plan of work. The timeline that I talked about that's very aggressive, the Memorandum of Understanding is due tomorrow at 4 o'clock in the Department of Public Instruction. So if approved, it'll be signed by our president, Dan, and myself. The union has been asked to sign it, but has not agreed to sign it, so it will be signed by the two of us if you approve this. The state application will be submitted. Their plan is to submit it on January 15th, and I believe it's due on the 19th. In April, the states will be notified of grant funding. So until April, we will not know what the status of Wisconsin is and if they will be one of the states that will be selected to receive funding. All 50 states can apply, There have been speculation about how many states will be selected, and yet there is no information that I'm aware of from the federal government about how many that will be or if it would be all 50. Let's see. After the Wisconsin is notified and notifies districts of their particular funding, we then have 90 days to develop a plan of work or to opt out. And so we can choose, even if we approve the memorandum of understanding this evening at that time, to opt out or to continue forward and accept the funds. The district plan then must be approved by the state. There is much that's unknown at this time. I'm going to just go through a couple things, but there are many, many more. Will there be any funding for the state and for the district? Will the funding be sufficient to support implementation of all the requirements? What support and guidance will come from the state? How does this align with HSD 2025, our strategic plan and vision? And then, do we have capacity to manage implementation of both? And they intersect, but they are not the same. And is this plan best for Hudson students and the district? Those are just a few of the questions that we have at the present time. The state is certainly encouraging all the districts to support their application. It makes their application stronger if more districts are supporting it. And they would like us to do that with consideration and understanding that districts may opt out later when there is more information. The state superintendent's organization supports signing the memorandum of understanding just for these reasons, and I would recommend to you that we sign the memorandum of understanding to support the state's application and to allow time for more information to be clarified so that we can make better decisions in the future. If we don't approve the memorandum now, then we, no matter what the funds available to Hudson, we will not qualify for them. This is our only way to even think about accessing that funding. So I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions for Mary? Mark?
Well, yeah, just a couple. First, Mary, did I hear you say that the teachers' union representative has declined?
Correct.
Okay. Was there reasons or rationale offered, or?
Well, I don't want to represent those, Mark, but there has been throughout the state some reluctance from other teacher organizations, unions, to support those.
Okay.
Probably, I can only guess, but there's a lot of unknowns. So,
well, clearly there is, and I think too, if there wasn't this 90-day opt-out, I'd probably have some serious reservations at this point as well, considering that it's such a variable as far as what kind of funds we might be getting and what they're asking. I read through this, and not with as much detail as I would have liked. It's pretty little confusing. I'm not even sure which direction they're going in here, but. In any case, the state is requesting that we sign, and it sounds like it's your recommendation at this point that we jump on board and wait to see how this develops further. That's right?
Right. At this time, I'm not recommending that we move forward with a plan of work. Certainly, we don't know if there's going to be any funding available at all. Right. But we really need to take a look at that in relationship to, is this best for our students? Do we have the capacity to move this forward? How does this relate with HSD 2025? All those need to be considerations, among other things, as we think about the ramifications of the requirements. We're moving forward already with some of the practices that are identified here, as I started to note to you. But there are other things that would not be our highest priority to move forward, yet will cost us resources, will cost us time, will take capacity in the organization and move it away from other things. Mm-hmm. And so we have to make a real deliberate decision, if that time comes, to decide, is this how we want to spend our efforts? This is an enormous initiative. When I look at the scope of this, there is hardly anything else most districts will do for the next 4 years if they choose to sign on to this.
Right. And I think, as you already stated earlier, too, none of these funds can be used to support what we are doing or planning to do. It has to be...
Well, it could be something that we plan to do that was new.
Okay, that's right. As long as what we plan to do aligns with the tenets of this program, right?
Correct.
Okay. Thanks.
Cindy?
So that means that we couldn't
use this funding to replace the funding currently for reading coaches, but if we wanted to add reading coaches, we could use it to expand the program.
We would be required to expand the program, and yes, the funds could be used to do that. And then we'd have to see, are there enough funds to even expand it to the level that they are requiring us to expand it to?
Thank you.
Brian? Or Lynn?
I guess one of my questions is the funding going to be based on reform and not need? Or are both those things going to be looked at? Or don't we have enough information to really answer it?
You mean the funding, how they decide what the districts get, Lynn?
Right.
The funding is based on a three-pronged formula, and it was the highest of those things. One was, I think it's $60,000 would be a minimum. It was $60 per pupil, and then there was a third. Right off the top of my head, I can't think of what the third was.
Free and reduced, I believe, was another component of the funding.
Right, so it was whichever was the highest of those is the final estimate that they've come forward with. That's not based on need. Now, Exhibit 2, the second phase of funding, might be more based on need, and we haven't really seen enough information about that to even know what that's going to look like, other than we've seen a list of initiatives you could sign on to do and support. And many of those are really urban focused. You know, it's focused on raising graduation rates that are certainly nothing like the Hudson School District's graduation rates. So there is a lot of urban focus here, and we have to figure out how can we, if we choose to do this, how can we use this as a means to help move forward our own vision and direction for the district, and if that's possible.
And how sustainable it is.
I'm sorry?
And how sustainable it is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Brian?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. Excuse me. First of all, just a couple of thoughts. Number one, does it hurt our chances of receiving dollars if our union representatives don't sign it?
No, we've been told that you only need one signature.
But then I wonder why they even ask for the signatures if it's not important. It seems like to me it would be important.
I think my guess, and I can only guess, is they're trying to create certainly interest in this, knowledge about it, and that's one way for us to move forward. We certainly met with the president of our union, Nancy Sweet, and I did, and talked about this. I know there's information around the state that's being circulated, and so we shared that information, and that was one reason we did, because there was a signature, and we asked them if they would be willing to sign it if the board approved it.
It just seems real important if there's federal dollars to be had, and there's some of the stuff in here would be good for our district. It seems to be foolish before we even understand the entire scope not to go after federal dollars to offset the tax burden to our local taxpayers and to move our district forward. My second comment is just the allocation of the dollars. So there's a pool of dollars allocated to Wisconsin, and it looks like this is a fairly comprehensive program that's hard to sign up for. It seems like we're in one of the best positions in the state to comply with this type of direction. So what I'm just encouraging us to do is maybe after this all gets said and done, this pot of money is only given to districts who can actually comply with this. Maybe there's an opportunity to even get more dollars out of this and help offset what could be fairly expensive to implement some of these programs. Mm-hmm. So just some things to think about. So that was my only comments.
Barb?
One final question. So given the timing of this, Mary, you would expect this to be back on the board agenda in May? Assuming we approve the memorandum of understanding tonight and the state gets notification of whether or not they are going to be part of the federal allocation, then we need to make a decision whether or not we are going to move to the next phase and agree to the terms of the scope of work.
Correct. I can't say for sure if it would be May. I don't know if we'll have enough information at that time. It could be June. It wouldn't give us very long. But we will not start working on the plan of work until after we find out what the allocation would be, because it doesn't make any sense for us to get started. Certainly, we're moving forward the efforts we already are that are listed here, part of the requirements. But there are numerous areas that we haven't even touched, because some lack of resources and some it is not our high priority at all. So yes, it could be May, but it might be June.
Okay. Any other
I guess I have
comments,
just
Lynn?
one more. Do we have any information about whether that will impact our future state funding if we take federal funds? I mean, will there be any equalization formula or anything? Tim?
Not to my knowledge, no. They haven't talked about any negative impact to funding. But again, as we've seen with stabilization funds, and I'm not going to say that this is happening with Race to the Top, because this program's probably had a little more time in the incubator to develop. But sometimes the rules do get modified and clarified as we go.
Just adding on to that, something I haven't said much about is it looks like from the first blush as you look through the information that the reporting requirements on this program are going to be very, very significant. That may require additional staff just to do that part. We don't know yet because we haven't seen enough information that we know. But this is not something that I believe we can just move forward very well with our existing staff. We'll have to allocate some staff, at least, again, at first blush as we look at this. Reporting is really going to be a big part of this. We've heard there's no downside to accepting the money.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was wrong. Signing the MOU, agreeing to sign the MOU. I take that back.
Big qualifier there. Just to tag on to that conversation, I would imagine if we did decide to go forward with this, we'd probably want to cost this out over, multiple years just to see, what the long-term impact would be. Because, yeah, those dollars may come in, might get us off the ground, but there's probably some ongoing obligations associated with it that we'd want to at least be aware of going forward. Is that correct, Tim?
If you're asking me that question, yes. We are. Yes, we have been considering that in our discussions about the program.
Okay, good.
Mr. President, can I ask one more thing?
Sure.
How about our CISA? Would they be a resource for centralized reporting where you're not adding bodies, but maybe sharing resources across districts to that specific need?
They're looking at things. This, again, the timetable is so aggressive with this that the state has had very little time, and I look at the things that they're going to provide for us, like training and more information. And one of the things they will be hiring as a director for this program, and I can't figure out at all how they'll have time to do any of those in a 90-day period after they receive funding and provide that for us, because it takes a lot of time to work through these issues. The CISAs are scrambling right now to try to figure out how they can be helpful. I was at a meeting with other superintendents and CISA leadership talking about that, and that's not clear either. CISAs are receiving no additional funding to do this, and they're short of funding now. So any funding to CISAs is going to come through districts. So there could be an economy of scale. And there may not be, because our own size, too, may limit that. So our own economy scale might be even better, which it sometimes is.
Mark?
I thought of one thing just with regard to the administration of this. It'd be my guess that probably these funds couldn't be used for administrative support of these programs. Am I right?
Yes.
They could be used for that?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Anyone else? Okay, this is a topic for action, so Brian?
Mr. President, move to approve the memorandum of understanding for the race to the top. Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Brian for us to enter into the memorandum of understanding. Okay. And we have a motion or a second by Tom. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion's approved. Thanks, Mary. We'll move on to the special education staffing guidelines. Corey?
Thank you. In your materials, you'll see some background information on this item, and I'd like to take just a moment to emphasize a few points in your materials. The Student Services Department has updated their special ed staffing guidelines and really to align to our district priorities. As the district has established guidelines or staffing guidelines for general ed class sizes, the staffing guidelines for special education are intended to provide an analogous framework. And a couple points I want to emphasize, as it says in your materials, the primary purpose here is not to provide criteria, but these are really guidelines, and there will be variations among staffing. Some will have, these ratios and the guidelines you see in there will result in some staff having lower staff to student ratios and some having higher ones. In addition to that, I really want to stress that the primary purpose here is to really establish equity across our buildings and our programs for the students with disabilities so that we have equitable programming across our buildings in all of our, or at least the vast majority of our programs. And it's also important to note that even with this structure in place, students that receive special ed services, they have their program of education developed on a case-by-case basis, and that's determined by the IEP team based on the student's individual needs. So there still is, really at that level, those where the decisions are made. Lastly, I just want to talk about the fact that lots of information has been reviewed, and I think we reviewed that at Learning and Program Development last week. Lots of planning has gone into the development of these guidelines, so we feel confident that this will give us a solid framework to work off of in the future. So with that, I'll entertain any questions you may have.
Questions for Corey? Brian?
Yeah, I have a question. When I look at these special education staffing, I don't see anything on gifted and talented.
Right.
So could you comment on that, how we staff gifted and talented, and why it doesn't show up in these special education?
Well, the special education program doesn't include gifted and talented because special ed is students on IEPs. And the size of the program is such that we have over 700 students on IEPs, and the level of detail, the legalities, the complexity of special ed does require us to have a solid framework in place. Now we do have processes in place for gifted and talented, ELL, any of the other programs that fall under student services, and we're analyzing that continuously, but we, at this point, we're ready to move forward with the special ed guidelines. We have work to do yet with gifted and talented and ELL as we look at service delivery. Although we still, we look at past trend data. I wanted to emphasize, too, that we watch student counts every month. We're tracking that on an ongoing basis. It's not just decided once a year as we plan for staffing. But the reason gifted and talented is not included here because it doesn't fall under special ed. They're separate programs.
Okay, so I understand that, and I just think it's really important that we're meeting all student needs of all of our students. Mm-hmm. And specifically, it's come to my attention on gifted and talented in the middle school that I don't know if it's a resource issue or there's a challenge in the middle school right now. And so when I saw this, that's kind of, I made those two connections. I said, so I just wanted to kind of get that on the radar, and I would like to see a review of that. And I think that's important to meet our needs of all of our students.
And I'm continuously meeting with the principals and with the gifted and talented staff. I met with the ELL staff today. They were meeting the whole day long. So we are doing that analysis. But we want to make sure that as we look at our service delivery model, we don't let the staffing drive our model, but the model gets developed and then we staff it accordingly. Okay. So that I want to assure you that is getting done, even if you don't see it in this. Special ed has a unique set of points we need to follow and information we need to follow. Just do the additional rules and regulations that go along with special education. So those things are being done, and we will develop the other areas as long as we have the appropriate time to give it its due diligence.
Other questions?
Just
Mark?
sort of a comment. I just want to say I share, Brian's concern with the, gifted and talented program, and I know that part of it, of course, is I think Corey alluded to. It's numbers. There's obviously the special education program is much larger, and it's fair to say, Corey, that the legal requirements are pretty profound for our students on IEPs, and that's sort of, I guess, legal protection, for lack of a better phrase, just really doesn't exist for gifted and talented. Is that right?
Well, I think in general you could say that, although, that doesn't diminish our focus on it. And like Brian said, we're focused on providing quality services for all of our different programs, but special ed does carry a whole other set of regulation at the state and federal level. So this allows us to have a starting point to make decisions around staffing and have some equity across the building because it's a very large program.
Right. No, and I understand. And I actually had firsthand experience because I had two children in Hudson system, one in a special ed program and one who was identified as gifted and talented. Yeah. And so the contrast sometimes as we're going through their educational program was quite significant. I mean, but I understood that. But I mean, I guess I just want to reiterate that. As Brian said, we do want to provide what we can for all our students, so all our students can excel to their greatest extent, and that doesn't include the gifted and talented. So.
Why can't we consider gifted and talented why can't we make the decision to have, meeting the needs of all of our students with special needs, right? Why can't we include gifted talented in special education?
Special education's for students on IEPs, and our gifted and talented students aren't on IEPs by law. That's the short answer, I guess. Yeah, okay. They may have other plans that address their needs, but it carries a whole different set of requirements.
All right. Well, so I'll just go on record. I would like to see a little more review of the gifted talented program, the dollars allocated to it, the student teacher ratios, and do a review of that. So I think we have some challenges right now in secondary education.
Yeah. And I have all that data. We've been doing that work, so we're just still developing it.
Okay, so there's a challenge there. So we need to look into it. So
I just want to reiterate Corey's comments. As he's come on board in the district, he has been looking at all of our programs with our staff, and certainly they are also very engaged in this process as well. So that will be something that he has already initiated, Brian, and is moving forward. And we can bring that back once he completes that work.
Good.
Thanks, Mary.
Dan, could I just make a comment? I just, as a member of the Learning and Program Development Committee, I'd just like to make a comment that I was very impressed with the comprehensiveness of the factors that you weigh into looking at these decisions. I don't want that to go unsaid. I think and people not to hear that because this wasn't done by any measure lightly, or it has been done from a lot of different views, a lot of different perspectives, and I think from that standpoint, regardless of the issue about especially talented students, this situation has been done very well, and with a lot of in-depth considerations, and I think that should be noted.
Okay, thanks, Tom. And I would imagine one of the components was consulting with this department and getting their input and feedback.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. We actually ongoingly, continuously are evaluating that and getting on input.
Okay, good.
And I'm sorry, Dan, just if I could also, I'd just like to second Mr. Holland's comments and also mention that the Personnel Committee also had reviewed this extensively last week and certainly endorsed Corey's proposals.
Good. All right. Any other comments, questions? Thanks, Corey. This is a topic for action, so entertain a motion for approval of these special education staffing guidelines.
So moved.
Motion by Cindy.
Second.
Second by Mark. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion's approved. Mary?
Before you take action on the consent items, I wanted to just note something that's involved in those consent items. That is a resignation and impending retirement of Principal Pat Hodges of Rivercrest. I don't see Pat out here, unfortunately, but I would like to recognize her contributions to the district. You know, Pat started as a licensed practical nurse, and she was a nurse for 10 years before she moved into education. She was first employed in education as a learning disabilities teacher, and then she moved on to a resource teacher in special ed, probably a multi-categorical, we probably say now, and that was in Virginia. And then she started work in our district about 24 years ago. And she started as a multi-categorical teacher at EP Rock and at the high school. And then she moved into principal and fifth grade teacher at Holton Elementary. She became a special ed teacher at Holton along with being principal and a couple other years. And then eventually, I guess she graduated to full principalship as probably the school became a little larger. She was also a principal at another time and gifted and talented teacher part-time at Holton. And then she became principal at Willow River, which it looks like she was principal there for 10 years before she moved on to Rivercrest. So we have been blessed to have Pat as one of the leaders in our district for, I think it's 24 years, but if that's not close, it's lots of years, certainly a good portion of her career. And we have benefited from her leadership expertise, her experience, her strong interpersonal skills that certainly served her as a teacher and then as a principal. She cares deeply about students and families and the staff that she works with. And she has the attitude about getting it done. She's one person you can count on to just move it forward. I can't say enough about her willingness when I tapped her to open Rivercrest, her willingness to work with us as a team, to move forward with multiple balls in the air at once, to look at what staff needed, what families needed, and to try to meet those needs even before the building was open. And certainly one of the things that has aligned with Rivercrest, that's just a personal commitment and passion of Pat's, is her commitment to sustainability and the environment. And that's something that she loves and has been able to provide leadership at Rivercrest in that area. So we are very fortunate to have had her. It's with sadness that we think about her retirement at the end of this year, and certainly with congratulations to her of a wonderful career and contribution to our students, our staff, our faculty, community in the district.
Thanks, Mary, and I think I can probably speak on behalf of the board that we agree with those sentiments and certainly appreciate all that Pat has done for this district. So a special thank you, Pat. I wish you were here so we could personally thank you, but certainly I hope she gets this message of our gratitude. So thanks. Okay, I'll entertain a motion for approval of the consent items, including the expenditures.
Mr. President, I'll move to approve the consent items and expenditures in the amount of $2,006,127.49.
We have a motion by Mark. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Brian. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion's approved. So we'll take a brief break here while Mr. Holland vacates the meeting room, as we are about to move on to the next item on the YMCA Camp St. Croix expenditures. And he has left, so does anybody?
Mr. President, move to that the Director of Financial Services be authorized to pay the bills of the amount to the YMCA of $55.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on that sum?
I think we should talk about that.
Okay. If not, all those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, motion's approved, so, yeah. Glad you weren't in here to raise a conflict on that $55 expenditure. Okay, moving on to committee reports. Barb?
Okay, so the Learning and Program Development Committee last met shortly before the holidays, December 17th. We had a couple things on the agenda. Mary provided some feedback from the Chinese principals that were here in Wisconsin, and it was feedback from the collective group, but it was very interesting. What they saw, what they were surprised by, what they weren't surprised by, and generally some of the themes that they took home with them. Peg Shoemaker updated the committee on the new role for literacy coaches, which includes redefined roles for not only the coaches, but also the classroom teachers, the reading specialists, other support teachers, and the building principals. And really, Peg's overall message was that the role of the coach is to work with the teachers on best practices. So the coaches aren't working with the students, they're working with the teachers in the classroom on what are some of the best practices for literacy instruction. And the goal of the changed roles is really to increase the service to our neediest readers, as well as personalizing the intervention for struggling readers, which is aligned to the federal response to intervention guidelines, and also to measure the reading growth of all the readers, getting at those that are already above grade level, as well as those readers below grade level. And finally, Sandy provided an update on specific goals that support our global literacy and environmental sustainability, graduate learner outcomes. And some of the focus areas obviously are adding the global language. We're looking at other curriculum and interactions or exchanges around global literacy, and also looking at opportunities for professional development. And then in the environmental sustainability, again, looking at curriculum opportunities, outdoor learning centers, of which we have some already, the R cubed, reduce, reuse, recycle, and then also some professional development. So that was the last committee meeting.
Okay, thanks, Barb. Any questions for Barb? Thanks again. We'll move on to Finance Committee. Brian?
Thanks, Dan. The Finance Committee met on the 21st of December. In our agenda, we covered we had a review of the nutritional services improvements. I have to, Peg Eller, really an impressive program that she's put together, and just imagine it, just financially, the driving more nutritious meals into our school systems, and the way she's managed our costs of fresh fruit and everything else. It was actually pretty impressive. So I think we had a pretty good program there. So hats off to Peg and that organization. So then we review the race to the top. A memorandum. I won't cover any more detail. We had good discussion tonight on that. So, and then we we adjourn to closed session. Any questions?
Any questions for Brian? Thanks, Brian. And Tom,
Facilities and Grounds Committee met on January 6th. All the members were present, as well as Tim Erickson, Jim Stacekel, and Mary Bowen Egebraden. We had 3 agenda items. The one you've heard tonight already a little bit about, and that was the middle school short-term space for learning update. We received and talked about the same process that we referred to tonight in tonight's board meeting, and scenarios of potential options for short-term solutions in that regard. More to come with that. The second item was the impact of the 2010-11 budget regarding facilities and grounds. I think it's important to understand that as staff goes about, making determinations on facilities and grounds, the impact that the budget will have with it, there are certain criteria with guidelines and things that we feel like are primary objectives. And one of those is that any large projects that enhance the education experience, we want to pay attention to that. Secondly, we want to make sure that any ongoing items for repair and replacement are addressed that won't end up costing us more money later on. And then the third one is room for reprogramming with enrollment changes. And as something I've learned, that as enrollment changes and numbers fluctuate, that does require changes in rooms as well. So, and finally, I think what I'd like to indicate regarding this item is that since the year 2005-06 budget, there has been a decrease in budget allocation expenses for facilities and grounds. That I don't want to mislead anybody, however, because prior to that, we've been very generous, very healthy with allocations for our properties and assets. So you have to kind of weigh that with it. But it has been a drop, and I think what we want to make sure is that we don't get to a level where we're falling behind. Because as I'd said before, that situation just ends up costing the district more money. So, and then we adjourn to closed session. So,
Okay, thanks, Tom. Any questions for Tom regarding facilities and grounds? And that last point you made, Tom, regarding, this district's commitment to maintaining our facilities is certainly a wise one. And I think if we don't maintain that type of position, those problems can sometimes be even more expensive. So I appreciate that. Personnel and Negotiations Committee, Mark?
Thanks, Dan. The Personnel Committee met last week. The workload was so burdensome, we asked Mr. Holland to join us, and he graciously agreed. We discussed the special education staffing guidelines and received Mr. McIntyre's extensive report, and we discussed that at length. And as I mentioned earlier, the committee did endorse it. And then we had a closed session where there was discussion of employment and negotiation issues.
Okay. Any questions for Mark? Okay. Mary, I'm guessing we forgot something on the agenda. It's 7:30. So, is there? Did I overlook something here? Okay. Diane, any citizens request to speak? No. Okay, thank you. Okay, I guess we'll move on towards adjournment to closed session.
Mr. President, I'd move that we adjourn to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statutes 19.85, Parent 1, Parent C, Parent E, for the purpose of deliberating to prepare for negotiations with union groups representing teachers, educational assistants, media assistants, health assistants, and nutritional services employees for the purpose of deliberating about the sale and or purchase of public properties, and for the purpose of considering superintendent evaluation.
Okay, we have a motion by Tom. We have a second. Second by Brian. Any discussion? If not, we'll have a roll call vote.
Robson, aye.
Bell, aye.
Kaiser shot aye.
Holland, aye.
Chernohoy, aye.
Crimmins, aye.
Van Luden, aye.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming this evening.